It is Tuesday evening if you're listening anywhere here in the States. And we're talking about, there are a few topics more important than the topic we're talking about tonight, because we're talking about helmet safety and technology, and every person who rides should be wearing a helmet, of course, but also should kind of understand like some information about their helmet and why they chose the helmet they did and when they need a new one, because it truly could save your life. So, no pressure on this conversation, but we have the perfect person to chat with us about it, and that is Jeanie Clarke. Jeanie, thank you so much for taking time to teach us more about this topic.
Thanks for having me. Hi, everybody.
So, maybe to get started, will you tell us a little bit about your riding background and then your professional background as it
Mhm.
ties into what we're talking about?
Yep. So I've been a professional eventer, trainer, horse seller, instructor, coach for most of my career. I evented as a kid and came up through Pony Club and groomed at the FEI level. I groomed at a couple world championships. I was a working student. I spent a year in Europe. I did all the stuff. Um, and I was also kind of an idiot of an athlete in other sports. I was a snowboarder and a skateboarder and a mountain biker and played hockey. Um, and when I had to pick one and sort of settle down to a career, of course, it was going to be eventing. And I live in Ocala now, and I have switched mostly to show jumping, but I do still have a few students in eventing. But what I really do now is run a sales business called Equestrian Outfitters that, among other things, has a big focus on helmet safety.
There you go. That was incredibly concise. You're a professional at at being an interviewee. Um, that's really helpful to have that background. And um, I was telling you before we hopped on here, I was like, I don't know if we can spend a whole hour talking about helmets. And then I put a post in our member Facebook group, and pretty much instantaneously, it was like, ding, 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 all of the people posting their questions on it. So turns out we have more than enough to get into today about helmets. And I'll kind of I'll kind of let the members' questions lead the way and fill in some of the blanks with my own curiosities, but definitely take us down any roads that we should be going down that I'm not already. But one of the first questions that we got is from Amanda Chance, who's actually the person who connected us as well. And I
Yeah.
think it's a good place to start because it's something that I think
Hi,
people are.
Amanda.
Hi, Amanda. I think it's something people are familiar with, at least in having heard these terms, but maybe not in having understood these terms yet. So, Amanda said, what are the key differences between the main helmet safety standards? And she listed like ASTM, SNEL, and I don't even know these other ones. She wrote PAS, VG1, etc. And why do
Yep.
they matter?
So what I learned a couple years ago, I was actually at badminton horse trials on vacation with my mom. We were there as spectators and we were walking around the trade fair, and I heard this New Zealand nasal, hyperactive, super smart voice in the background, like over the crowds. And I was like, come on, mom, who's that? Let's go see who that is. And it was Reese Powell, who's the guy that founded Aero Helmets. And he was talking about this exact question. And basically, ASTM is the primary American safety standard. VG1 and PAS are for Europe and Great Britain. And these are the organizations that traditionally have tested and approved equestrian helmets. What I didn't know was that there is a higher level of certification that's out there, and that is called SNEL. SNEL is a nonprofit organization out of California that was founded in the 1950s after a few human fatalities in amateur motorsports, car racing guys. And a guy named Peter Snell died sadly racing his car, and his friends and his colleagues in the sport got together and started the Snell Foundation to try to push the needle forward on helmet safety for motorsports. And today, that organization also has an equestrian helmet division. And Snell's testing standards, their requirements, in my opinion, much more strongly represent the risks that we face riding horses than the ASTM and the more typical safety standards. For example, when ASTM tests helmets for concussion reduction, they test a drop from about 6 feet. It's 6.2 feet. So they test for how much force goes through the helmet into your head on a 6 foot drop.
It's a small
And
pony.
that's just not, it's not applicable to riding. So Snell's impact tests replicate about 18-foot drops, which is way more accurate for riding like real horses and jumping and riding at speed. So what I learned was that from Reese was that the standards that are out there for most of our helmets don't hold the helmet manufacturers to high enough. So they're not
Yeah.
actually certifying in a way that mimics the risks that we face in the sport.
And why is that? Is that because the helmet manufacturers are the people or groups behind these certifications, so they make it kind of a low bar to clear? Or is is ASTM, for example, is that equestrian sport specific, or is it not equestrian sport specific and that's why they're doing a drop from 6 feet because it's just
ASTM isn't equestrian specific, but it has equestrian specific standards. And those standards only test from 6.2 feet. Honestly, I don't want to be so pessimistic that I say it's because there are manufacturers sitting on those boards. There are. Snell is the exception. It's nonprofit and it has no industry reps sitting on its board. So I think that Snell can make decisions and design their testing protocols without having to consider the input of people that manufacture helmets.
are all of these I don't know what you would call them, like safety standards or safety certifications. These
Mhm.
things we're talking about, ASTM, Snell, PASS,
Yep.
BG1,
PG1. Yep.
are they all applying to different activities in addition to equestrian sports?
I don't know. I don't know about the international ones. Snell does. Snell has
Yeah.
motorsports, downhill mountain biking, skiing, um, different levels of motorsports. So highway safety or like dirt biking. They have different standards for those sports because if you're riding a motorcycle on the road, you're going to have a slightly different set of risks than you would if you're racing motocross on sand.
Are there
So
any
they
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Are there any other comparisons between Snell and the others that make Snell a little bit more, not only more rigorous but more applicable, that come to mind?
Yep. The biggest one for me as a career eventing rider is that Snell has real crush test standards. Um, if when you test a helmet for any of these organizations, the way that it gets tested is there's a head form that has computer sensors in it, and you put the helmet on the head form, and then bash the crap out of the helmet, and the head form measures what the human head experiences inside that helmet. And sometimes they drop the helmet, sometimes they swing the helmet and knock it into other things. There's different ways of actually performing the test, but they all involve a head form inside a helmet. When you're talking about crush, a helmet is said to fail a crush test if it has 30 millimeters of deformation. So if your helmet smushed inward, sorry, 30 millimeters inward, that would be considered a fail because that's an amount of deformation that your head can't survive. The number for ASTM is about 162 pounds of pressure. It has to, you can't have 30 millimeters of deformation with 162 pounds of pressure, but that's not enough pressure. I weigh 162 pounds. Like
Yeah.
that's not an applicable
Yeah.
test to the sport. And to be honest, the Snell one isn't really high enough either. I think it's 550 pounds, but it's still a lot more than 162.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Um so
Snell,
Snell,
so I can give you a quick rundown on the different things that are tested.
I would love that.
ASTM, let's start with ASTM because it's what most of us know right now. ASTM tests impact onto flat ground from 6.2 feet, impact onto what they call a hazard edge, which is like a 90-degree corner, like a board, from 6.2 feet. It has 162-pound crush resistance. And it has very minimal head coverage standards and very minimal materials maintenance standards. So, how much heat, for example, your helmet can withstand without losing safety. So, like if you leave it in a hot car, I bet
Yeah,
nobody's helmet's going
like
to
we
really
all
survive if
have,
you leave it in a hot car.
or
But so
trailer.
we test all things like that. They also test retention system straps. So all of the safety standards test for that small group of things. Snell uniquely only is the only one that tests for impact onto round objects. It's called a hemisphere test. Um, so a horseshoe or a rock or a pole, it turns out that that kind of impact is, so here we can do a little demo. That kind of impact is sort of like a point, because when you have a round object like a rock, the impact that the helmet experiences is really, really precise and therefore really extreme. So Snell also tests for round objects. Um, Snell tests for actual spikes as well, although I can't quite imagine when that comes into play. And Snell tests the entire helmet looking for a weak spot. So when Snell tests for penetration by a spike, they're going to test even the air vents to make sure that your air vent isn't going to be a weak spot where a spike could get through. So
Wow,
it's a really much more rigorous standard.
that's amazing. And Snell works similarly as ASTM in terms of
Yep.
it's either Snell approved or not. It's not like a rating
Yep.
system.
Correct. It's not a rating system. It's just a yes or no.
Okay. What is it widely adopted at this point? Are there a lot of equestrian helmets to choose from that are Snell approved or
Nope, there are 4 equestrian helmets that are Snell approved. The easy way to know whether your helmet is Snell approved or not is whether or not it has a steel buckle. If your helmet has a steel buckle, it could have passed Snell. If it has a plastic buckle, there is no way, because one of the things that Snell tests is harnesses, and they put the helmet on the head form and they attach a hook and a motor onto the helmet, and they try and break the helmet off the head form. And often the buckle is the first thing that breaks. So any helmet with a plastic buckle is not Snell certified. The 4 that are Snell certified, the Charles Owen 4-star skull cap is Snell certified. And again, check, make sure it's the actual 4-star one with the steel buckle. It's a really good helmet. Gatehouse and Champion each also make Snell certified skull caps. And Arrow helmets are Snell certified.
amazing? Are Do you know offhand if those four have a price point that's like, is it double another helmet that's not Snell certified, or is it somewhat comparable?
You're gonna tempt me to talk about prices.
I
The
will.
helmet,
Honestly, we
the,
have a lot of questions here about prices, so don't
yeah,
feel shy about it.
okay. You can buy ASTM certified helmets for under $100. Um, I could be wrong. I haven't looked in the last few weeks since tariffs and things have changed in this country, but I'm pretty sure Snell certified helmets start around $500. And I think they go up to sort of 750. So they are in the higher price point, but they aren't the very most expensive.
Okay, super helpful to know. And I'm scrolling through my questions here because I recall that one of them was about a replacement um,
Hmm.
program. Do crash replacement, here it is, crash replacement programs. Some brands offer them, others don't. What should riders know about how helmets hold up to impact? And should brands be more transparent about their durability? That's from Katie Emerson, who you actually just helped her replace an Aero helmet. She said she had a
Cool.
crash.
Yeah,
So
it's a
thank
great
you for
it's a
being.
great question. Um, all helmets, all equestrian helmets that I know of at this point have an inner protective layer that's made of EPS foam, that's expanded polystyrene. It's a fancy word for styrofoam. And obviously, there's different grades and qualities of EPS foam. But the way that the EPS linings work to reduce concussion is that they smush or they deform under impact. And that deformation gives your head time to slow down a little bit before it comes to a complete stop. And some concussions are skull injuries or skull fractures, but most of them are actually brain injuries caused when your brain moves through your head and impacts the inside of your skull. It turns out, I didn't know this, but it turns out the human brain is jelly-ish. It's soft, and the inside of your skull isn't very smooth. So when you fall off and your head hits the ground, your brain moves, sloshes to the side, and impacts the inside of your skull. Obviously, that's a terrible simplification. But what the EPS liner does is it slows down the rate of deceleration of your head against the ground to reduce that concussive effect. And the way that it does that is that your EPS liner smushes to slow your head down. Once that has happened, that part of your helmet can't smush as well again. It might look normal. It might expand again and look okay when you turn it over to look inside it, but its characteristics have been forever changed. So if you have a significant impact to your head, you should replace your helmet every time.
And tell us, I guess I'll start with what qualifies as a significant impact. Like if you do drop it from, if you're holding it and you drop it on the cement floor walking down the barn aisle, does that count? Or if
I
you,
don't think that
that
counts.
doesn't
It's a
count?
good question. I don't know. I have never seen any real data about that, but I don't think that counts.
Okay.
I've replaced mine if I've had the feeling that I got my bell rung or that I
Okay.
was like, "Oh, my head," like any feeling like that, but
Yeah.
you can't necessarily see it. I've had
Okay.
a few returns come in where you can see that the EPS lining has been deformed, and that's pretty scary to look at. Like
I
that's a
bet.
concerning thing. One of the reasons that Snell certified helmets test better is that their EPS lining is thicker. So when you look at a Snell certified helmet, it's not going to be this little pretty slim thing because there isn't enough styrofoam in those to really offer significant protection. So I think that part of the conversation about helmet safety, everybody always says, "How does it make me look?"
Yeah.
Or "Is it flattering?" And Snell helmets are bigger. They have more safety material in them, no question.
I mean, it's flattering to still be able to, walk and
Yep.
speak and do those
Yep.
things.
Yep.
It's funny that you mentioned that because equestrian sports are pretty much where I have lived my life in terms of like sport interests. I'm married to somebody who is all about every other sport, like comes from a sport family. My family calls him a sports player, and he's like, "You guys are ridiculous. You don't know anything." But we were watching the show called Hard Knocks, which is about the football teams, and
Mhm.
some of those football players are wearing like much bigger mushroom like looking
Yep.
helmets. And
Yep.
my husband explained to me they're just like more protection. So if that person has had a lot of concussions, and I was asking about why they don't wear them in games, and he's like, "Well, it looks silly." And I'm like, that is insane.
Yep.
Like, let's
Yep.
keep these on. Let's keep these on, especially for people who are high risk. And so, looking at a different sport, it's so easy to say that, but when it's time for you to put it on, I get that there's some hesitation there. But with something like this, if
Yep.
anybody's on the fence about it, you look great.
Yep.
Whatever helmet you're wearing, you look amazing.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and football's a great example because they've had so much media about concussion risk and the long-term effects of head injuries, that they've really been required to upgrade the helmets in that sport. And they've done a great job. Like, that sport as a community has responded to what it's faced and improved their equipment. And I think equestrian sports are long overdue for that. If you guys have kids in grade school or middle school, they have to take concussion baseline testing before the school year, before they can play school sports. And then if they have an impact to their head, they have to retake their concussion protocol and get their normal score before they're allowed to return to play, for example. So other sports have come a long way in terms of addressing and acknowledging the risks of head injuries. And I think it's time for riding to catch up.
That you just unintentionally answered another question that somebody asked. So it is interesting, and it's always nice to have other sports, especially other sports with so much money behind them and so much media attention, that's doing some of the work that we can kind of hopefully follow in their footsteps. Um, Circling back just to tie a bow on Katie's question, is it common to have crash replacement programs? Do a lot of brands offer that? Is that something people should be?
Yeah, I think they do. I think
Okay.
they do. And I think if you're not sure, you should reach out to your retailer. And if they're not sure, you should reach out directly to the brand, because it's not really in the retailer's best interest to sell one at a discount. So you might have to look a little, but I think it is pretty common.
Okay, great. Um, Next question comes from Hannah Clarke. She said secondary impact is a big concern in equestrian falls. Do any current helmet standards test for this? And she's talking about like bouncing off the ground or getting struck by a horse's hoof after you've already hit the ground. Is there
Yep.
any research or
I
testing on
I
that?
don't know in terms of actual lab testing. I don't know the answer to that question. It definitely, that one of the things that sort of obliquely refers to is both head coverage and rotational force dissipation. So the ASTM standards don't test for rotational force dispersion. Rotational force would be a glancing blow, like a kick, or if you had in eventing we used to call it lawn dart. Like if you had like
Yeah.
a high speed fall where you hit the ground at an angle rather than straight down, um, those create rotational force on your head and on your helmet. And the ASTM standards don't test for that. Snell actually doesn't directly test for it either, but that's where the product called MIPS comes into play. So MIPS doesn't help with impact protection in any way. It just reduces rotational force. So a secondary impact, your primary impact might be the whack of your head onto the ground, and the second one might be the horse's foot coming over top of you and giving you a rotational blow. So MIPS is a little bit different feature than impact protection.
That was something we have here too. So how much does MIPS, and forgive me if you just addressed this, but I was trying to find the MIPS question while you were speaking. So MIPS stands
Yeah.
for Multi-Directional Impact Protection System. How
Yeah.
much does MIPS technology really help, and in what types of falls is it most effective? Is it something that you would
Um,
personally say like, I need my helmet to have MIPS?
it's a great question. MIPS MIPS MIPS's own numbers will say that the addition of MIPS to a helmet decreases rotational force between 20 and 30%. Um, what we Arrow Helmets has found in our own testing is that number, that 20 to 30% number, is correct in lower end helmets that don't offer a huge amount of impact protection. MIPS really does improve the performance in those helmets, but in your Snell certified higher end helmets, it is, according to our days of testing, less beneficial than that. So
Okay.
and there's also some new systems for rotational impact dispersion coming up from some other companies as well. So it'll be interesting to see in the next few years if some of the MIPS competitors can improve on those numbers.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like MIPS is kind of not judging themselves against something that's easier to judge themselves against, like using those kind of
Yeah.
lower end helmets and saying like this is
Yeah.
30% better.
And and listen, I'm a big MIPS fan, and we are very happy to have MIPS in aero helmets. Um, Partly because it's really increased everybody's conversation about it as well. Like when MIPS first came out, it was in that trauma void helmet first. And I can remember everyone being, "Oh, have you seen that new helmet? Have you seen the new helmet with the yellow thing, the yellow twisty thing?" And no, I hadn't. And then it sort of got everybody talking about how their helmets worked and what they did for us. And that's absolutely invaluable.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I'm a big MIPS proponent. As somebody who sells helmets, it does generate sometimes a little bit of a fit challenge because the way that it works, the original MIPS system had basically stacking salad bowls in your helmet. It had the cloth liner, and then this is an oversimplification. Sorry, MIPS. It had a yellow bowl that slid inside the bowl of the EPS lining. And that slip between the yellow MIPS product and the EPS lining is what provided rotational impact protection. Um, so when you think about fit, if you have a round head, it fits quite nicely in a yellow
Mhm.
bowl and everything slips fine. If you're like me and you have a long oval head, which means mine is skinnier on the side and longer from front to back, sometimes fitting MIPS is a little bit of a challenge for somebody who doesn't have a round head. Does that make
Interesting.
sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. Tell me more about the you mentioned the trauma something helmet. I don't know anything
Trauma
about that.
void.
Will you just
Yeah,
tell me
that
about
was
it?
to my memory, that was the first MIPS helmet. And it's still available, and they've had a couple of generations. There's Trauma Links and Trauma Void, I think. And um, they use that first MIPS system that has the yellow bowl inside of it. And the bowl is designed to slip vis-a-vis the rest of the helmet so that if you have an angled blow, like an oblique impact, the helmet is going to decouple from your head, and that's going to take some of that impact off your head and off your neck. And
Okay.
that's what MIPS does, is it decouples the helmet from your head and reduces rotational force.
Yeah. It does seem very important. Like when you think about how falls happen, the concept seems very important.
Mhm. Yep. And a
You
lot of secondary impacts are, this is how we got here. A lot of secondary
yeah.
impacts are oblique impacts.
Okay. Super helpful. And we were talking about fit and how MIPS might be better suited to a round head. One of our
Mhm.
questions is it says helmet fit is crucial, but many riders don't know how to determine if they have a round versus an oval head.
Yep.
Me included, I have no idea. What are the signs and how can riders find a helmet that truly fits?
Okay. Um, Helmet, I'm gonna is it okay if I break this down into a couple different pieces? Um, it's too simple to say that the safest helmet is the one that fits the best. If you go into pretty much any tack shop in the country, the people that work there are gonna tell you to pick the one that fits the best because it's the safest, and that is not actually true. Snell certified helmets are significantly safer than non-Snell certified helmets. The Snell certified helmet that fits you the best is probably better for one than one that doesn't fit you very well, but partly because you're more likely to wear it and be comfortable. Um, what we have found in our lab testing is that the tightest helmet is not necessarily the safest. In fact, a little bit of decoupling of the helmet from your head, assuming it stays in place, isn't a bad thing. So, people always ask me, what about my hair? Can I put my hair in my helmet? At Pony Club, they taught us, no, you can never put your hair in your helmet. Your hair is not safety material. And that in testing turns out to not really be the case. Your hair isn't going to decrease the safety of your helmet if and only if your helmet fits with your hair in it. But you can put your hair in your helmet. It is a little bit decoupling. So let's talk about hair and helmet fit. When you put your helmet on, it should come about 1 finger above your eyebrows, half an inch above your eyebrows. If you put your hair in and it makes your helmet too high, like way up on your forehead, because your hair's up on top of your head, you can't put your hair in it. You got to take it out. So 1 finger above your eyebrows with your helmet on. If you wiggle it with your hands, it should move your eyebrows. I don't know if you can see me or not, but it should move your eyebrows with the helmet. If the helmet comes up and down like this, it's too big. And obviously, if it hurts or it's uncomfortable and leaves a dent on the front of your forehead, it's probably a little bit too small. So those are the two really simple ways to tell if your helmet fits. 1 finger above your eyebrows, and it should move your skin and move your eyebrows with it. Other little things to think about are, I actually had a helmet once that rubbed the tops of my ears off.
Oh
And I
no.
didn't know it. I couldn't really feel it. And I went to the dermatologist for my annual thing. And she's like, "Oh, it looks like you have skin cancer on your ear. You have a non-healing lesion on your ear." And they, they biopsied off the top of my ear. And it turns out it was just because my helmet was too low on my kind of big ears and it rubbed the
Oh my
tops of my ears off.
gosh.
So you have to check like obvious things like that. Does it sit down far enough that it's going to cover your occipital bone in the back of your head, but not so far that it's going to rub the tops of your ears off? It's not rocket science. It's pretty simple.
There you go. Um, that's great. And I think that that's great too to hear kind of that common advice about the safest helmet is the one that fits the best
Yeah.
is not something that you should take too literally. Um, okay, let's see.
No,
What
I have actually I wanted here's my pet peeve on that one.
I love
Um,
pet peeves.
dial helmets where they've got the little dial on the back of your head. Those fit great. You put them on, you turn the dial, it's exactly right. I used to buy them all the time because they fit great. But what they've done when they've manufactured those helmets is removed protective material from the back of the helmet where your occipital bone is and put a dial in its place. So that helmet fits really well, but if you fall and hit the back of your head, you just have a dial for a
Uh-huh.
large piece of protection, and that's really not okay. So
Okay.
I think like I am definitely anti-dial fit helmets for that reason. Your occipital bone is the softest part of your head. Your occipital bone's fairly plastic. It's bendable. So your helmet should cover it. Um, it should not your helmet shouldn't go down so far that it interferes with cervical joints, but it should cover your occipital bone in the back of your head. And if you have a dial, you're not covering your occipital bone.
That is important to know. Are there any other pet peeves or non-starters for you in the helmet world? There's probably plenty of non-starters,
Yep.
but
There's
anything
lots.
that comes to mind.
Um, Visors, visors for sure. It turns out, all you eventers out there, if we were in Great Britain or Europe, it would not be legal to go cross country in a helmet with a fixed visor. That's where the skull cap and silk cover trend came from. So I think nobody should be riding in a helmet that does not have a pop off visor. I have a video. Everybody sends me their fall videos now. It's so sad. But I have a video of a friend falling in a helmet with a fixed visor. And she goes sort of face first into the footing in an arena, and the visor catches the sand and bends her head and neck back like a scorpion. So for me, fixed visors are also a total non-starter. Don't get on a horse with a helmet with a fixed visor.
Is it that's I really wouldn't have known that that was that a risk like that, but makes
Yep.
complete sense. Um,
Yep.
if it pops off, are you like full thumbs up on it? And I'm also thinking about the ones that
Mhm.
are like full sunshades, just as
The
in case it
floppy
pops off.
sunshades that you add to your helmets don't bother me so much. I mean, you might end up doing a face plant and getting some road rash from the binding of your visor or something, but that's fine. That's, those are
Yeah.
sort of, those things happen. But there are some helmets out there that have quite big visors now that don't pop off, and I think that's terribly dangerous.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned putting hair in your helmet, and
Yep.
one of the questions I have here is about, I'll just read it to you. Helmet fit can be a challenge for riders with different hair textures and styles, such as braids, locks, or natural
Mhm.
curls. Are helmet manufacturers considering inclusivity in their designs to ensure a secure fit for all riders? Have you seen that?
Yes.
Okay, tell us more
Yep.
about that.
We're sure trying. Um, I know that for my own company, for Arrow, it's a really new company. It's only 2 years old, and we are definitely short on our size run. In the future, we're going to have a larger shell break that's going to have more room, both for people with bigger heads, because there's certainly some people that we can't quite fit yet, and for people with braids and locks that need more room in their helmet. I don't have any safety concerns about having a lot of hair inside your helmet if your helmet's still stable on your head and is still offering you enough coverage, for sure. I know some companies offer size breaks with cloth liners, and that's a good way to go too. Like if you wore your hair different ways, you could have a slimmer liner for when you have more hair up in it, or a thicker liner for if you're going to have your hair down or have shorter hair. Like there's definitely ways to address that. Is the industry doing well enough on inclusivity? No way. But we're definitely trying. I know that a couple of manufacturers are working on 3D printed EPS liners in helmets, which are completely customizable, is a great idea. Obviously, that's going to prevent MIPS or rotational impact systems from working. So if I had a helmet that was 3D printed to exactly fit my head shape, it would not decouple from my head. I'm sure there's experts working on that, but we need to come up with a way that a 3D printed helmet could also offer rotational force dispersion. And I'm not sure what that's going to
Interesting.
be.
Is there any other technology that you've seen either within like equestrian sports up and coming, or looking at those other sports that we've talked about,
Mhm.
skiing, cycling, motorsports, that you find really intriguing or just exciting for helmets at large, despite when equestrian sports get there?
Yeah. Well, the biggest one for me in equestrian sports right now is facial and jaw protection. In motor sports, motorcycles, and motocross in particular, there is a huge amount of data that says that full face helmets with chin bars, and full face helmets with chin bars combined with neck donuts dramatically reduce face and neck injuries in what they call unrestrained athletes. So athletes not wearing seatbelts. Um, there is a gentle move in that direction in riding helmets. There are GPA and Free Jump both have helmets whose harnesses come down and cover part of your jaw. And those aren't rigid, they're soft, but they're at least covering some of your jaw. And Arrow has a rigid chin bar, more like a motorcycle helmet, that can clip on and off our helmets. And Arrows is actually Snell certified for equestrian sports. So it is legal to wear in USEF and FEI competitions, but there isn't a whole lot of data. Um, I think I'm the only person that's worn it in a show. I jumped in it at Hits, just because I thought I should. Um, and I went to the ground jury the night before. I went into the show office and I found the TD and I said, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know this is what I'm doing. Here's this piece of equipment. You're probably going to get some frantic calls from the warm-up storage tomorrow. Who's this crazy person in a motorcycle helmet?" And I said, "It's not. It's a Snell certified, totally legal equestrian helmet." And it was actually really cool. The judges and everybody came over. They all wanted to try it on. They wanted to see it. They're like, "That's so cool." So I think that it's coming, but we don't have much data for it for equestrian sports yet.
That is so cool. And this conversation kind of reminds me of, I remember the first person I remember wearing a helmet at, I think it was a 5 star, which would have been a 4 star at the time, was Allison
Mhm.
Springer. And I remember being like, I mean, I hate to admit this, but I was like, that's a bummer. The top hats are so great, and she was the
Yeah,
only one doing
she
it.
wore it in dressage. I remember that.
Yeah, and I didn't see it as the beginning of a movement. And it was the beginning of a movement. And it's such an important movement, and how incredible to be the first mover in something that is going to help people and save people and start conversations. And things like wearing a helmet with a chin bar like that, it's different for people. And so I mean, the initial interpretation might be like, how weird or whatever it is.
Mhm.
But if
Mhm.
it's moving us toward a safer sport, how amazing. Like now I could never respond to anything that is moving us in the right direction when it comes to safety equipment with
Yep.
anything but
Yep.
like applause. Like thank you
Yep.
to anybody who's doing it for helping us move in the right direction. And it's kind of the same thing with the larger helmets too. Like we should all be celebrating that. And that's it's just cool for the people who are taking those first steps and recognizing what they're doing and why they're doing it. And I love that you wore yours at hits. I was going to ask you if you've seen anyone do it, but you did it.
Yeah. No, I
um
wore it and like everybody's looking at me. I was riding around in warm up and I was like, wait, do I know that person? Do I know that person? And I
yeah,
totally didn't. They were all just looking at me and it made me think that maybe I knew them. And it was pretty
right,
funny, but once you have it on, like you can still see the horse's outside shoulder, you're breathing fresh air. Like once it's a little hard to get on and off, but once it's on, you don't notice it at all. So it was
how cool.
I think I had one down, but I didn't embarrass myself, so it was fine.
Well,
And I wear it pretty regularly on the young horses, so it's cool.
how cool. You mentioned a neck donut too. What is that?
Mhm. So, actually, there's a couple of five-star riders that would like to be wearing the full face helmet with a neck donut on cross country. A neck donut is a ring or a donut of semi-rigid foam that goes around your neck. And it meets up with the bottom of a full face helmet and it prevents you from hyperextending your neck in any direction. And there people who have full face helmets in other sports don't resist it for riding at all. They're like, oh, great idea. Why doesn't everybody have that? And so a few of these guys that have come by and talked to me are like, oh, I would totally wear that with my motocross neck donut. Or that motocross now has a chin protector that has some neck donut characteristics to it. And they would like to ride cross country in that because they feel like their necks are safer. I don't know what I think about that. Like I've made it pretty far by being able to put my chin on my chest and tuck and roll. And even with the Aero chin bar on, I can still put my chin against my chest and roll. So I would be afraid to wear a neck donut and then not be able to use my usual like fall
Yeah,
dynamics to roll safely away. So I'm not sure what I think about that. There's a really good, if people want to read about it, there's a good resource for chin bars for unrestrained athletes on the Laert website. LAERT is a motocross safety company, and they've got great white papers with tons of data on them if you want to go check that out.
is there a reason that the neck donut would be more important for a motocross athlete versus an equestrian athlete, or is it the same in terms of like our motocross athletes? It's not like widely
I wonder,
adopted,
I'm
or
not sure. I'm not sure. And that's obviously that's the right question for sure. I like we don't have enough data about how people fall. Like what the physical possibilities are. And I think they're so variable in riding that it's hard to test. We're actually working on doing some of that with crash test dummies the way they do for automobile accidents. But it's almost like there's an unlimited array of different ways
yeah,
to fall. So it's sort of hard to guess.
yeah. One of the questions that we got here was about like helmet airbags. Is there anything?
Mhm.
And And motocross reminds me of it because obviously we kind of took our air vest idea
Yep.
from motocross.
Yep.
Is there anything that you've seen as far as airbags going on the head or neck?
I haven't seen it, but we're certainly actively having conversations about whether or not you can make an air vest with a neck donut that popped out in
Oh,
exactly the right way for a rider. So, like if I were going to wear a full face helmet and an air vest, I would want the air vest to be like a deep V-neck so that I could put the chin bar against my chest and tuck and roll the
yep.
way I learned at LandSafe and the way I always have. So there's a lot of conversations about how air vests change your fall dynamics for better or for worse, and whether or not there could be a way of having an air vest provide some interaction with a helmet in a way that would be good.
Yeah. We had a guest on here once who mentioned that he was really concerned that he knew how to fall, and he's like, I sometimes don't put my air vest on because of that. And he's like, I know this is going to be controversial. I don't know if I
Yeah,
should say it,
yeah,
but it makes sense, especially for professionals who truly do like know and trust their ability to
yeah,
fall.
yeah. No,
Very
well,
different.
we've actually been working on that. I've been a total rockhead of an athlete my whole life and have walked away from some really bad athletic decisions because I'm good at falling. So when for the air vest conversation, we've retrofitted a little fleet of air vests and we can pump them up with a bike pump so you can wear them fully inflated. And we've been jumping on the trampoline and jumping in the pool and doing somersaults and rolling around and trying to figure out what we could do. It's totally not scientific, but it's really
Yeah.
fun. And try to figure out what air vests do in the moment. And we have found that for the most part, they do not prevent us from doing this and for getting your hands up in front or for tucking and rolling. They also seem to rise up a lot, especially for women. The bottom coil of the air vest is going to ride up to your waist. It's not going to stay down around your hips. That just doesn't work that way. And I know for some women that are chestier, that's even worse. Like the effect where the air vest ends up going is more depending on your conformation as well. So I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of misinformation and assumptions out there about air vests that aren't right, and we're really trying to start to get it right.
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing the work. I'm laughing just thinking about
Yeah,
you guys jumping in the pool with your vest
yeah,
on, but it is
yeah.
work. Somebody has to do it. Okay, I'm going to hit a few of these kind of just faster questions.
Mhm.
One is magnetic, plastic, and metal buckles. Do they
Yep.
offer different levels of security? Obviously, you've said yes, but do you have a preference between magnetic or just your plastic clip?
No, I have a strong preference for metal over plastic. I have a really horrific video of somebody falling and her helmet gets torn off on the turf. Like the way that she falls, the brim of her helmet, it's a skull cap. It's not even a hard visor, but the front of the helmet grabs the ground and the buckle breaks and the helmet comes off and the horse behind her steps on her head. It happens to be a racing rider, but it could easily be your own horse's hind leg. So I have a strong preference for metal buckles for
Yeah.
Snell certified helmets that are going to stay on.
Yes. Keeping the helmet on your head is
Yep.
for step one to the helmet working.
Yep.
Samantha asked, "What features are considered absolutely non-negotiable when selecting a helmet for safety?" Uh, can you do you feel like you can answer that?
Yeah. I mean, for me, no dial is
Yeah.
non-negotiable. For me, the head coverage piece is significant. There are some helmets that are actually too long in the back that when they sit on my head would absolutely interfere with my cervical joints. So that's a non-starter for me and fixed visors.
Okay. Great. We had a question about ventilation,
Mhm.
and you were talking earlier about kind of I can't remember the words that you used, but like points of weakness on a
Yep.
helmet.
Yep.
Is ventilation inevitably going to be a point of weakness, or has that been figured out and you can feel
Um,
comfortable
it
wearing your
It often is a point of weakness, but it need not be. In Snell certified helmets, the ventilation is going to be covered with steel mesh so that it's not a point of weakness. And if you
Wow.
take your liner out of a Snell certified helmet and look through the vent holes, you can actually appreciate how thick your EPS lining is. So
Hmm.
if it's got steel mesh over it so that the helmet doesn't lose integrity over the vent holes, you're okay.
Okay. Katie Emerson asked, "What are the telltale signs that a helmet needs replacing, even if it hasn't been in the fall?"
Uh, Age,
Okay.
just age. Or if you leave it in your car in Ocala.
Yeah. Is there a like what's the expiration date on most helmets?
3 to 5 years is the expiration on most helmets. Snell has significantly higher requirements. So you could surmise that Snell helmets could last longer, but I wouldn't want to risk it.
Okay. Um, Taylor asked me to relay to you. She said, "I'd love to know your thoughts on the various research studies out there, both national and international. How much should we base our helmet selection off of this research?" And then I remember there was mention of Virginia Tech's
Yep.
research in
Um,
another question.
I fall into the category that all discussion is good discussion. So I'm very appreciative that the Virginia Tech study is out there because it really got everybody talking and thinking. What I don't appreciate about that particular study is that the data is not available. So you can see the rating system and you can see the very complicated equation that they use to arrive at the rating system, but you can't see the actual data. And
Huh.
I think that's too bad, especially given that a lot of our associations helped pay for that. I think that the data should be available.
Have they responded to that feedback and said why or no?
I don't know. I know that they used a little bit different testing modality that's quite hard to recreate. They used a pendulum test instead of an impact test. And most helmet manufacturers don't have access to pendulum testing equipment, is my understanding. So, like I know for aero helmets, our helmet has been sent in to Virginia Tech now, but we needed to figure out how to recreate the test ourselves so that we knew what was actually being looked at, and it's not very transparent. And I think that with helmet safety in mind, I think everybody's data should be transparent because it's not a fashion product. It actually is a safety product, and I think we should be sharing our data.
Yeah. Okay, that's really interesting. Um, I have two more questions for you, and they're kind of high level, like just make sure that we cover all the basis type
Mhm.
questions. One is, what's the biggest mistake people make when buying a new helmet?
Oh, it's just they
Probably a
they
lot.
want to know how they look, and
Yeah.
that's not the most important question. It just isn't.
Yep. Definitely not. Last question is, if you could give riders one piece of advice about helmet safety that they might not have heard before. You've already given me so much advice that honestly I didn't know so much of what you've shared, and I'm so grateful that you are sharing it. Is there anything that you haven't mentioned yet that we should make sure to touch on?
I think helmet materials really do matter.
Okay.
Um, we haven't talked about that. So we've talked about the EPS lining. That's the expanded polystyrene protective material inside the helmet. But the outer shell of the helmet can and should play a role in rider safety. And in a lot of the lower priced helmets in particular, it's really just very thin plastic. One of the top rated helmets in the initial Virginia Tech study had an outer shell that was basically the same density as a solo cup, which has generated a lot of jokes in our household. But the reason that helmet tested well in the Virginia Tech study was because that study was mirroring ASTM impact standards, which are low height onto flat ground, testing for concussion reduction only. And that helmet blew into a million pieces when it hit the ground. And so it dissipated a lot of the force that was headed into the head form. And that's not good enough. You need to be looking at outer shells that are rigid and are going to offer crush protection and also offer some impact protection, not just that are going to deform.
Okay, so likely plastic is not really what you want the outer shell to be made of. I see mention here of carbon fiber or Kevlar helmets.
Yeah.
Are there materials that you would put kind of like on a podium? These are best case scenario,
I,
or is it just like avoid
as an
plastic?
eventer, I really value the crush protection that rigid carbon Kevlar provides because that's what's crush accidents are the fatalities and the real life-changing injuries. So for
Mhm.
me, I'm going to really prioritize crush protection in my own helmet. Is there a conversation about whether or not having a rigid helmet uh, could mean that maybe you had a little bit more concussion risk because it's not plastic enough? I think we need more data on all that kind of stuff. For me, that crush protection is the most important piece. And I know that a Snell certified helmet has crush protection and has a huge amount of plasticity inside it for concussion reduction.
When it
But
comes
they're not
to
all created equal.
yeah, when it comes to future research that
Mhm.
and data that's collected that's truly applicable to the sports that we're doing, do you think that that data is going to come out of Snell? Like, are they doing research like that, or is
No,
it?
that's not
I mean,
really, they're not in product development. I think it's gonna come from consumers requiring manufacturers to do better.
okay,
And I think that product development is gonna come from manufacturers. It's already come into a lot of other sports, so it would be very possible with enough capital investment for equestrian helmet manufacturers to adopt technology that already exists for motocross, say, or downhill
yeah,
mountain biking or downhill skiing.
yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Um, Final question is just where can people find you? How do you work with people around helmets or
Yep,
other safety equipment? Yeah, where should they go?
yep. So arrowhelmets.com is the place that you can see all of Arrow's data. Um, and my phone number is on there. My email address is on there. If you want to buy a helmet on there, you can have a video chat with me and we'll figure out what size you should order. And then when you get it, we can figure out how to shim your liner and make sure the fit is perfect. So that's the easiest way to go. And there's also a lot of information on my website, which is equestrianoutfitters.net.
And is equestrianoutfitters.net, can you shop on
Mhm.
equestrianoutfitters.net as well? Okay,
Yep,
and that has Arrow helmets in addition to you carry other brands of
yep, yep,
other things. Sorry to
yep.
be
I
so
do,
vague.
I do some saddle fitting. I have an apparel line, but Equestrian Outfitters has a huge amount of information about helmets on it as well, and then it will direct you to the Arrow website to buy a helmet.
Amazing. And people who are
Yeah,
in Ocala, do they ever see you in person for helmet fittings, or do you mostly just do saddle fittings in person?
yeah. You can meet me at the Juniper General Store. We can get a fancy coffee.
Oh, I
Um,
love it.
Yeah, I don't have a stand, like a stand at WEC this year, but we're taking the mobile unit to some events and stay tuned on that. We have a big project in the works for a permanent space in Ocala.
Wow, I love it.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, well, you are an absolute wealth of knowledge. No doubt the correct, like truly expert for this. So thank you so much again just for taking all of our questions and giving us amazing answers and helping us kind of better understand this really important aspect of our sport.
Cool. Well, thank you. I'm really into it and I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Well, have a wonderful evening. Thanks, Jeannie.
Thanks. Good night.
Bye. Well, I hit stopped recording, but this platform it just keeps going for like another minute. So people who are watching
Okay.
live can still see us. It's something that we learned um obviously, just by learning the hard way. But
Yep.
not that anything
Yep.
has been said, but we're probably still live. But you